I want you to think of a specific person, not someone who hurt you. That is different. Someone who just irritates you, out of all proportion, whose voice, whose face, whose way of being sets your teeth on edge for reasons you can never quite justify. You know the one, the colleague who is so needy it makes your skin crawl, the relative whose arrogance you find unbearable, the person online whose fakeness enrages you far more than a stranger's fakeness should. Hold that person in your mind, because I am about to say something uncomfortable about them and about you. There was a Swiss psychiatrist, one of the most influential minds of the 20th century, who studied that exact reaction for decades. And he came to a conclusion that once you hear it, you cannot unhear. It will change how you experience every strong dislike you ever have again. His claim was this: that heated, disproportionate irritation you feel, the one that is a little too strong for what is actually in front of you, is very often not information about them at all. It is information about you. You are looking at a piece of yourself, wearing someone else's face. His name was Carl Jung. And the piece of yourself you are looking at, he had a name for that too. He called it the shadow. And understanding it is, I think, one of the most genuinely useful things a human being can do, because it hands you a key to your own reactions, to why certain people undo you, to why you keep having the same fights, and ultimately, to a kind of freedom. Because Jung's deepest point is chilling and liberating at once. The parts of yourself you refuse to look at do not go away. They run you from the dark, and they wear disguises. And I want to promise you where this goes, because it could sound like an accusation, and it is not one. This is not, you are secretly a bad person. It is almost the opposite. It is, you are more than the polished, acceptable version of yourself you have been allowed to show, and the pieces you exiled, to be liked, to be safe, to be good, are not gone. They are in the basement, and they are the reason certain people get under your skin like nothing else. So we are going to go down there, carefully, and meet them. Because Jung's promise was that the person who does becomes harder to manipulate, harder to enrage, and a great deal more whole. But first, how does a part of you end up in the dark in the first place? So, the shadow. Where does it come from? And the answer starts, as these things usually do, in childhood. Not because of some trauma necessarily, just because of how becoming a person works. When you are small, you are whole. You are all of it at once: rage and sweetness, greed and generosity, neediness and independence, selfishness and love. A child is a full spectrum, with nothing yet hidden. And then the world begins to teach you which parts are welcome and which are not. You cry too loudly and someone is annoyed. You get angry and you are punished. You brag and you are shamed. You want too much and you are called selfish. And you learn, fast, the most important survival lesson of childhood. Some of what is in me gets me love, and some of it gets me rejected. So you do the only sensible thing a small, dependent creature can do. You start to sort yourself. The acceptable parts you keep in the light. You build them into the self you show. The unacceptable parts, the ones that cost you love, you push down, out of sight, even out of your own sight. And that pile of everything you had to disown to be accepted is the beginning of your shadow. And notice, this is not a moral failing. It is not weakness. It is necessary. You could not have functioned as a child holding every impulse equally. The sorting is how a workable personality gets built. Jung was not against it. The front you built, the acceptable, presentable self, he called the persona, the mask. And we all need one. The problem is never that you have a persona. The problem is what happens to everything the persona had to leave out, because you did not delete it. You cannot delete it. You only moved it, somewhere you can no longer see it. And things you cannot see, you cannot control. And here is a crucial subtlety, because it decides what ends up in your particular basement. It is not the same for everyone. Your shadow is made of whatever you specifically had to disown. If you grew up where anger was dangerous, your anger went down. If you were praised only for achieving, your right to rest, to be ordinary, went down. If you were the good child, your selfishness, your appetite, your mess went down. So each person's shadow is a photographic negative of the self they were rewarded for building, which is why, as we will see, it is so revealing when it finally shows itself. It shows you exactly what you exiled. So you have pushed these parts down, out of sight. And here is where most people's intuition is wrong, and where Jung gets genuinely interesting. You assume that what you repress goes quiet, weakens, fades from lack of attention. It does the opposite. Jung was emphatic about this. The material you push into the shadow does not weaken in the dark. It ferments. It gains a kind of pressure. He said something striking, that the more desperately a person tries to be only good, only light, only acceptable, the blacker and more forceful their shadow becomes. The harder you press the lid, the more it pushes back. Because the impulse itself is still there, fully alive, just unsupervised now, cut off from your conscious judgment, your maturity, your ability to handle it wisely. A part of you frozen at the age you exiled it, running loose in the dark, with no adult watching it, and it wants out. That is the thing to understand. The shadow is not passive. It is not a landfill. It is a pressurized chamber of everything alive in you that was not allowed to live in the light, and it is constantly looking for a way to surface. The question is only, how? And the answer to that is the whole point of this episode. Because a repressed thing under pressure finds the gaps. It leaks. It comes out sideways, in ways you do not recognize as coming from you at all. It comes out in the slip of the tongue, in the overreaction, in the mood you cannot explain. It comes out in the exact behavior you most despise, enacted suddenly by you, in a moment you will later struggle to explain to yourself. The person who prides themselves on being calm, erupting, the one committed to being good, doing something small and cruel and baffling. Jung said, when you deny the shadow long enough, it does not just leak. Sometimes it takes the wheel, and you do the very thing you swore you were not. And there is one line of Jung's that captures this whole danger, and it is worth memorizing. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he said, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Sit with that. The parts of yourself you refuse to look at do not vanish. They steer. They pick your fights. They sabotage the thing you say you want. And because you cannot see them working, you experience their effects as just your life, bad luck, the way things go, your fate, when a great deal of it is the shadow driving from a seat you refuse to look at. But its favorite trick, the most common way it surfaces, is subtler and stranger than any of this, and it involves other people. So we arrive at the mechanism. The main way the shadow gets out, and it was first named not by Jung, but by his older colleague and later rival, Sigmund Freud. In the 1890s, Freud described a defense the mind uses. He called it projection. And the idea is deceptively simple. When there is something inside you that you cannot bear to see, something that threatens the acceptable image you have of yourself, the mind performs a trick. It takes that thing and it experiences it as being out there, in someone else. You do not consciously decide to do this. That is the key. You do not sit and think, I will pretend my anger belongs to him. It happens beneath awareness. What you actually experience, fully, sincerely, is that he is angry. She is arrogant. They are needy. The judgment arrives feeling like a simple observation of the world. Jung put it perfectly. We do not make projections, he said. They happen to us. You are not lying. You genuinely see the trait in them. It is just that the reason you see it so vividly, react to it so strongly, cannot look away from it, is that it is also, secretly, a picture of something in you. The other person becomes a screen, and your own disowned material is the film. And this is genuinely elegant as a piece of psychological machinery, because look at what it accomplishes. It lets you experience your forbidden trait fully, intensely, without ever having to admit it is yours. You get to feel all that anger, righteously, at the angry person. You get to be consumed by someone's arrogance, while remaining, in your own eyes, humble. The shadow gets its outing. The persona stays clean. You get to run the exiled feeling at full volume and keep believing it has nothing to do with you. It is the perfect crime. The only cost, and it is a large one, is that you never learn the truth about yourself. And you spend enormous energy fighting out there, a battle that was always in here. And Freud saw it as a defense, a shield against anxiety. Jung took it further and made it a doorway. Because if your shadow shows up projected onto other people, then other people become the way you can finally see your shadow. You cannot look directly at what you have repressed. By definition, it is hidden from you. But you can look at what you hate, at what triggers you, at the traits in others that make you disproportionately furious. And if Jung is right, that list is a map of your own basement, written in the names of people you cannot stand. Which raises the obvious question, how do you tell an ordinary dislike from a projection? So here is the diagnostic. Because you do not react to everyone this way, and the difference is the whole tell, it is not the dislike itself, it is the charge, the disproportion. Some people you simply find irritating, mildly, and you move on. That is probably just preference. But some people, some traits, produce a reaction that is too big, a heat, a contempt, a fixation. You find yourself thinking about them, ranting about them, energized by your dislike in a way that is frankly out of proportion to their crime. That excess, that extra charge, is the signature. Because think about it mechanically. If the trait were truly nothing to do with you, it would not have the fuel to burn that hot. A trait that is genuinely neutral to you, genuinely absent from your own psyche, you can note and shrug off. The ones that set you on fire are the ones touching something live. Jung's line for it, when two people clash hardest because they are, underneath, most alike. The shadow is recognizing itself in the other. The fury is a kind of terrible intimacy. You are not looking at a stranger, you are looking at a relative, one you refuse to claim. Let me make it concrete, because it lands harder with examples. The person who cannot stand how much others show off very often has a hunger to be seen that they have brutally forbidden in themselves. Their disgust is the wall around their own longing. The person enraged by others' neediness is often someone who buried their own needs so early and so deeply that seeing anyone express need feels like a threat. The one endlessly disgusted by other people's laziness frequently drives themselves mercilessly because rest for them is forbidden. In each case, the intensity of the judgment is measuring the size of the thing repressed. The louder the outrage, the surer the bet that you are looking in a mirror. And I want to be careful, because in a few minutes I am going to complicate this, and I have to. Not every irritation is a projection. Sometimes rude people are just rude. We will get there. But before the caveats, sit with the uncomfortable version for a moment. Because the honest experiment is this. Next time you feel that heat, that specific, disproportionate contempt for someone, instead of only asking what is wrong with them, ask quietly, where does this live in me? And notice how much the question stings, because the ones that sting are the ones that are true. Now, a twist most people never hear. Because so far the shadow sounds purely dark, all the ugly stuff, the rage, the greed, the envy. But Jung said something more surprising. Not everything we exile is bad. Sometimes we bury our good qualities, our power, our brilliance, our capacity for greatness. And this has a name too, the golden shadow. And it explains something you have definitely felt, but maybe never understood. Because just as we project our disowned darkness onto people we hate, we project our disowned light onto people we idolize. The hero worship, the celebrity we are obsessed with, the mentor we put on an impossible pedestal, the intense admiration that feels almost like longing. Jung's unsettling suggestion that intensity is a clue too. When you look at someone and feel, I could never be that ache is often your own buried potential, seen out there, because you cannot yet let yourself own it in here. The qualities that move you most in others are frequently the ones asleep in you, waiting. And this reframes idolization completely. When you idolize someone, you are, in a sense, in a relationship with a disowned part of yourself. You have taken your own possibility, packaged it, and handed it to another person to carry. Which is why idols so often disappoint us. They cannot carry it forever. It was never really theirs. And the healthy move is the same as with the dark shadow, reversed. To ask, what is it exactly that I see in them? And could it be that it is a letter addressed to me about who I am allowed to become? The golden shadow says your triggers are not only your wounds, some of them are your unlived life. Calling. So here is the turn. Pull it all together, and something dizzying happens to how you see your whole life. Because if your strong reactions to others, dark and golden, are showing you your own hidden contents, then the people around you stop being just other people. They become a mirror. Every person who provokes a strong reaction in you is reflecting something back. The world turns into a kind of continuous, unflattering, invaluable readout of your own unconscious. And this completely inverts how you might treat the people who trigger you. Normally, they are the enemy, the problem, the ones who need to change. But through this lens, they are doing you an accidental service. The person who irritates you most is, without meaning to, without being paid, showing you the precise contents of your own basement, pointing at the exact doors you have kept shut. They are, in a strange way, your most honest teacher, an unpaid analyst who tells you the truth about yourself for free every time you lose your temper. So here is the line to carry out of this whole idea. The traits that enrage you most in others are often the exact traits you have exiled in yourself. Your contempt is a map of your own hidden country. And if you really take that in, it should do something gentle and humbling to you. It should soften just a little your certainty about your own judgments. Not erase it, soften it. Because the next time you are absolutely certain that someone is the problem, that your contempt is pure, objective, earned, a small voice can now ask, or is this a mirror? And that question, the willingness to even ask it, is the beginning of everything Jung thought a mature person could become. But it does not only happen to individuals, it happens to entire nations, and there it gets dangerous. Because everything we have said about one person scales. Groups do it. Nations do it. Whole cultures do it. Jung called this the collective shadow, and it is quite possibly the most dangerous force in human history. Here is how it works at scale. A group builds a shared identity, a persona of who we are. We are decent. We are civilized. We are the good ones. And exactly like an individual, everything that does not fit that flattering picture gets pushed down into a collective basement. The group's aggression, its greed, its cruelty, its capacity for the very things it condemns, all of it disowned, and then projected onto another group. And this is the engine underneath an enormous amount of human horror, the outgroup, the enemy, the scapegoat. Notice the structure. It is identical to the personal version. Whatever a group cannot bear to see in itself, it sees vividly, hatefully, in them. They are the violent ones. They are the greedy ones. They are the threat. And the more a society insists on its own total innocence, the blacker the shadow it is casting somewhere else. The loudest claims of purity are the surest sign of a hidden basement. And it explains something genuinely puzzling about human conflict. How ordinary, decent people, convinced of their own goodness, can do monstrous things to a group they have cast as the enemy. Because they do not experience it as cruelty, they experience it as defense, as cleaning, as dealing with the monsters. The darkness they cannot face in themselves has been fully relocated onto the other side. So attacking the other side feels righteous. It feels like fighting evil, precisely because the evil they are fighting is their own, now wearing the enemy's face. This is not an excuse for anything, it is a warning. The most dangerous person in the world is the one utterly certain of his own innocence, because his shadow is operating completely unwatched. And I raise this not to make a political point in any direction, but a human one. Whenever you find a whole group of people who have become completely certain that all the evil is on the other side, and none on theirs, you are almost certainly watching a collective shadow at work, on every side, including, and this is the hard part, your own. The lens does not let you exempt your tribe. That is the whole discipline of it. And the only known antidote for a person or a people is the same: to turn the mirror back around, to do the frightening work of asking, what are we refusing to see in ourselves that we are so busy hating over there? So what do you actually do with all this? Because seeing the mechanism is one thing, living differently is another. And Jung's answer has a name: individuation, a lifelong process of becoming whole, and at its heart is a single, repeatable move: withdrawing your projections, taking back the film from the screen, recognizing that thing I hate out there, that thing I worship out there, is mine, and bringing it home. It sounds abstract. In practice, it is very concrete, and it starts the moment you feel the charge. Here is the actual practice. When you notice that heat, that disproportionate reaction to someone, you treat it as a signal, not what is wrong with them, but pause. Something just got activated in me. What is it? And then the question that does the work, the one Jung's whole method points toward. Where is this in me? That trait I am so disgusted by, where do I do it or want to or fear I might? That confidence I resent, what would it mean if I wanted some? You are not looking to excuse them. You are looking to reclaim the piece of you that they lit up. And the goal is not to become a person with no shadow. That is impossible. And Jung thought anyone claiming it was the most dangerous of all. The goal is a relationship with it, to know your own basement, to be on speaking terms with your anger, your envy, your hunger, so they do not have to break out sideways. Because here is the paradox at the center of the whole thing. The parts you own stop running you. The anger you can admit to, you can now choose what to do with. The neediness you can acknowledge no longer leaks out as manipulation. Integration does not make you darker, it makes you more whole and, strangely, safer. A person who knows their own shadow is far less likely to be secretly ruled by it. And the reward Jung promised is real and worth naming. As you withdraw projections, the world gets quieter. The people who used to enrage you lose their grip. Not because they changed, because you took back what you had loaned them. You stop being jerked around by your own triggers, because you know what they are now. You become, in the truest sense, harder to control, because a person who has met their shadow cannot be as easily baited, flattered, enraged, or manipulated through the parts of themselves they refuse to see. Self-knowledge here is not navel-gazing. It is freedom. But, and this is essential, the idea has a dark side of its own. And if I stopped here, I would be handing you a loaded weapon. So now I have to take some of it back, or at least complicate it hard, because the shadow is one of the most abused ideas in popular psychology, and there are two ways it goes wrong. Here is the first. Not everything is projection. Sometimes the arrogant person is just arrogant. Sometimes your criticism of someone is simply accurate. Sometimes the reason you dislike a cruel person is that they are cruel, and you have correctly perceived it, and there is no hidden mirror at all. And if you take the shadow idea too far, you fall into a different trap. You start treating every judgment you have as secretly about you. You lose the ability to just assess someone accurately, to say that behavior is wrong without spiraling into, but what does my reaction say about me? That is not wisdom. That is a new way to be paralyzed. And worse, it can become a way to never hold anyone accountable. If all criticism is just projection, then no one is ever responsible for anything, and every real harm dissolves into, well, that is just your shadow talking, which is nonsense, and dangerous nonsense. So the signal matters. The tool is not for every judgment. It is for the ones with the disproportionate charge, the heat that is too big for the moment. That specific excess is your flag to look inward. But calm, proportionate, evidence-based assessment. This person lied to me repeatedly, so I do not trust them. That is not projection. That is just accurate perception. The skill is not to suspect all your judgments equally. It is to learn the specific flavor of the ones that are really about you, the hot, obsessive, disproportionate ones, and aim the mirror there, and to leave your accurate perceptions standing. And now the second, worse way this idea gets abused, because it has quietly become one of the nastier moves in modern conversation. The shadow is a tool for looking at yourself, and people have turned it into a weapon for attacking others. You have seen it, maybe done it. Someone criticizes you, and instead of engaging, you say, "You are just projecting." 3 words that do something very convenient. They take the other person's valid point and reframe it as evidence of their pathology. You do not have to answer the criticism anymore. You have diagnosed it away. It is a perfect little trick because it is unfalsifiable. If you deny it, well, that is just your shadow resisting. Any objection becomes proof, and it lets the accuser feel psychologically sophisticated while doing the exact opposite of what the idea is for. Because here is the thing, projection is a lens for your own reactions. The moment you aim it at someone else, you are just diagnosing at people. And Jung had a name for that too. Remember, active projection, where you assume you know what is inside another person and feel entitled to correct them for it. Confidently analyzing other people's shadows is very often itself a shadow move. The armchair analyst, deflecting from their own basement by touring everyone else's. So the rule, if you want to use this idea without poisoning yourself and everyone near you, is almost embarrassingly simple. The mirror only ever points one way, at you. The moment you use the word projection about someone else, to win an argument, to dodge a criticism, to feel superior, you have stopped doing shadow work and started doing shadow harm. It is a flashlight for your own cellar, not a laser pointer for other people's. Use it on yourself, it sets you free. Use it on others, it is just contempt with a diploma. And there is one more honesty I owe you before the end. Because this whole time I have been describing the shadow as if it were an established fact, a real structure in the mind. And I have to be straight with you about where the science actually stands. The shadow, as Jung described it, is not something anyone has measured. It is a metaphor, a powerful, clinically rich, intuitively compelling metaphor, but a metaphor. You cannot put the shadow on a scan. Modern scientific psychology is, rightly, cautious about entities you cannot measure. But, and this matters, the pieces underneath it are not fantasy. Projection as a defense mechanism has been studied empirically for decades. Repression, defensiveness, the way we deny uncomfortable traits in ourselves and over-detect them in others, these have real experimental support. We know that people reliably misjudge others through their own unconscious biases. We know self-image distorts perception. We know that the traits we are most defensive about, we spot fastest and judge hardest in other people. So the machinery Jung pointed at is real. His genius was to assemble it into a vivid, usable story. The honest position is, treat the shadow as a powerful lens, not a proven object. A tool that reliably shows you something true about yourself, even if the map it comes with is poetic, not clinical. And one last piece of care, because this idea can open real doors. Shadow work, done honestly, can bring up genuinely painful things. Old shame, buried memories, parts of yourself that hurt to look at. And that is worth doing, but it is not always a solo project. This is a lens for everyday self-awareness, for catching your reactions and learning from them. It is not a replacement for real support. If turning the mirror around opens something heavy, something that does not close again, that is not a failure. That is exactly the point where a good therapist earns their name. The bravest thing is not to do it all alone. It is to know when to do it with help.
So what do you actually walk away with?
Not, everyone who annoys you is secretly you. That is too glib, and by now you know why. What you walk away with is one habit, small, humbling, and, over a lifetime, transformative. It is this. When your reaction to someone is disproportionate, when the heat is too big for the moment, Before you are completely certain it is all about them, turn the mirror around once and ask, what might this be showing me about me? That is it. Not always, not for every mild dislike, just for the ones that burn. And you do not have to like what you find down there. That was never the deal. You do not have to celebrate your envy or throw a party for your rage. You just have to stop pretending they are not yours. Because the pretending is what costs you. The energy of holding the lid down. The people you cannot be near. The fights you keep having. The version of yourself that leaks out when you are tired and undefended and horrifies you. All of that is the rent you pay for refusing to own what is already yours. Jung's whole life pointed at one deceptively simple idea. What you do not own owns you. The trait you refuse to see does not release you by being hidden. It runs you from the dark and dresses up as other people, as bad luck, as fate. And the way out is not to become perfect. It is to become honest. To turn, every so often, and look at the thing you have been refusing to look at. Not to fix it, just to admit it is there, and to say, quietly, yes, that too, that is mine. Because the strange promise at the bottom of all of this is that the parts of yourself you finally stop running from, stop chasing you. The monster in the basement was only ever loud because no one would look at it. Turn around, look, and watch how much of what you called fate was just you waiting to be claimed. See what people hide, even from themselves.